The Unapologetic Gent, man, we're back. It's international break. Here to discuss some things, dealing with the international break. Personally, I don't love the international break um, unless there's a major tournament, the Euros, Copa America, African Cup of Nations, the World Cup. Honestly, Concacaf, the teams in Concacaf are kind of dead to me. Not the greatest football in that area of the world. So the usual suspects winning games. So nothing really to talk about. We expect certain people to go through. It was the World Cup qualifiers today. The Brazil and Argentina game got basically canceled, postponed, whatever you want to call it, due to coronavirus protocols. I think some Argentinian players didn't, do what they were supposed to do in terms of the protocols. So, I was really looking forward to that game. But other than that, international is kind of dead. The reason why I came on here to talk really was, a lot of people, friends of mine who, watch football all over the world are always asking me, with 330 plus million people in the United States, why can't we produce 11 quality players? And there's a lot of variables to that, I think. People ask me, do I ever think the U.S. will win a World Cup or get to a World Cup final? And the short answer is no, I don't. I don't see it happening. And there's a few reasons why. When you see such small countries that are producing top quality players and we don't. And I think it's just the way that we go about doing things. At the end of the day, for the when it comes to athletics really and truly, in order for I feel like for you to be successful on a large scale, like the poor and underprivileged people in your country have to be involved in those sports for you to succeed on a large scale. Obviously, there's anomalies, and there's, what's the phrase I'm looking for? There are anomalies and exceptions to the rule, but the exception doesn't prove the rule, disprove the rule, proves the rule. So when it comes to sports, really, especially in America, apart from playing the quarterback position and maybe baseball, which is more like skill-based, when it comes to hitting and throwing, like really the highest level of athletes that we produce generally come from the poor, underprivileged, working-class communities in the States. And I believe it's the same in other countries, especially for football. If you look at Brazil, I'm sure a lot of those guys were discovered in the favelas and playing. And you look at, France is another country that produces tons of players. These guys are just playing on the streets in Marseille and Paris. Africa produces a lot of top quality players as well. England. So I think the main problem with soccer or football in America really is that our poor, underprivileged kids aren't really playing soccer at a high clip. That's why I think where our poor, working class, underprivileged class is overly represented in basketball and football, glaringly. If you look at the majority of those guys, and if you exclude quarterbacks, most of those guys come from poor, working class communities. For example, American football, I live in South Florida, where the best American football players on earth are produced. They produce the high quality, and most of those kids come from poor, underprivileged, working class areas, not the area that I live in. And I've coached at the high school level for American football, and most of those kids come from nothing. And I think that's the biggest problem with football in America is most of the soccer leagues and organizations are really, focused in suburban areas where kids can pay to play. Whereas other countries that soccer is their number one export, they pay those guys to come play for them. We're charging people in America to come play football. So that's where the disconnect is. If we had, if football was as regularly promoted as, say, basketball is in America and as easily accessible, we produce more high-quality players. There's no doubt in my mind. There's no doubt in my mind. And if you look at, from a cultural standpoint, our two biggest exports in America are really hip-hop music and basketball, even though American football is the number one sport here from an international perspective. Basketball and hip-hop, which are both have direct correlations to the underprivileged working class poor. That's why I think Brazil produces the most quality players. They may not have the best national team every year, but if you look at the amount of Brazilians who play in other national teams, look at Italy, just won the Euros. They had a couple of Brazilians. Portugal won the Euros. The Euros before, they had a couple of Brazilians in the team. I've even seen Brazilian guys play for Germany, and other countries. So they produce high quality players. They could have easily 2 or 3 teams that could make a World Cup if they wanted to out of Brazilian players, no doubt in my mind. And the majority of those guys grew up poor, underprivileged. I believe there's a direct correlation. Again, there's exceptions. There are exceptions, but for the most part, that's where and then also football in this country, a lot of times, especially through school, football and American football are played in the same seasons. So the fact that you have the most popular sport in America played, American football played with, the original football at the same time at the school level definitely hurts as well. And then when you look at the underprivileged communities, because most of the people that come from those underprivileged, lower class, working class, whatever you want to call it, communities, don't have a lot of football, / soccer players coming back and, showing that they've made money and lived great lives. You're not going to have kids aspiring to be that. They see the LeBron Jameses, the Michael Jordans, the Lamar Jacksons, the Russell Westbrooks, those type of guys, the Cam Newtons coming back to their community and showing that. And I'm sure in Brazil, when you're growing up and there's the Peles and the Ronaldinhos and the R9s and the Romarios and the Zicos and the Kakas and Neymars, countless. I could go on and name countless Brazilian players who probably come back to their country, and there's kids growing up aspiring. The same could be said for, the other top quality countries, the Argentinas who had the Maradonas and the Messis and the Tevez's, Agueros and Di Marias and Batistas, and those guys, the Cambiasos and the Zanettis, Italy, the Baggios and the Cannavaros and the Maldinis, we could go on and on and on and on. So, that's really where the biggest problem lies, and it's one of the main reasons why I don't think the U.S. will ever be competitive in a World Cup in the sense of actually competing for a world championship. And it's disheartening to see because we have so many people in our country, and sports is such a big part of our culture, but the way that we go about it, I believe is all wrong. We have this play for pay model that we utilize in the suburbs of our communities in America that doesn't work. You need, in my opinion, I think you need you need people to come back to your community and inspire it, but also you need to be growing. And I think that's the big reason why our female football team is probably one of the best teams in the world, because they also don't have football to compete with, because women don't really play football. So, play American football. And it's one of our bigger sports for women, if not the biggest. So that's also part of it. And I think, from a female's perspective, it's a little more technical. It's not as athlete driven as well. Obviously, you don't have to be an exceptional athlete to be a good football player, but being an exceptional athlete and being a good football player obviously helps. Um, so I think that's the really tough part about it, and it saddens me that I know my country will never seriously compete for a World Cup. And I'm open to being wrong. I hope I'm wrong, but I highly doubt it. I've had these conversations with lots of people, and we've had agreements and disagreements. But the reality is, if you're not out there playing, and I don't see kids in America on the streets just playing unsupervised, just having fun like they do with pickup basketball or pickup football or baseball and things like that on a regular basis. Rarely do I drive around and see, and I live in South Florida, which is, basically, the United States version of South America. So a lot of those people come from countries where football is the number one sport. So, and I don't even see it here. So I know in the rest of the country, I grew up in Boston, like there weren't just kids outside playing football in that way. So it's tough, man. And we should be able to produce 11 quality players. In my opinion, we've produced, Alexi Lawless, Landon Donovan, Clint Dempsey. DeMarcus Beasley was a decent player. Pulisic looks like he's going to be an excellent player. Shout out to my guy Charlie Davies, who was on his way to being a tremendous player and then injuries derailed his career. Shout out to the Boston College alumni. But on a regular basis, I just don't really see it happening. We have more and more players playing overseas, but obviously it comes from the grassroots level. You start going to play overseas when you're 21. How much of a difference is that really going to make in the long term of you becoming a world-class player? Like, we should be able to produce a team that has 5 or 6 world-class players in it, and 5 quality players that could play in the top 5 leagues and start for the best teams in those leagues in England, Spain, Italy, Germany, France, Portugal, places like that. And we just don't, sadly. And I'll watch the game tonight to see, but honestly, it's really disheartening for the U.S. men's national team when it comes to football. There's not much really else to say about it. People can debate it, but I was a high-level athlete myself, and the reality is, if you're not developing those type 2 fibers when you're younger, you're not going to reach that elite athlete stage. And if you're only playing a sport when your parents bring you to practice or to a game, you're never going to get to the level, that elite level, that you could. If you look at the Messis or the Neymars or the Cristiano Ronaldo, you think they were only playing and practicing when their parents brought them to a game or to practice? Of course not. Of course not. Because it's very similar to basketball in the sense that it's a skill-based game. American football is different. You cannot play American football and then just pick it up, when you're in high school, because if you're just bigger, faster, and stronger than other people can teach you technique later in life and you become good. World football is not like that. Just the same way basketball is. You can't just all of a sudden start dribbling like Kyrie and Steph Curry, if you start practicing when you're 22 years old. It doesn't work that way. It's a skill-based game that you have to develop your technique, your first touch, your passing, all those things as you go up in age groups and at a very young age. And then also probably we have a high lack of quality of coaches as well here to develop, the kids that are playing. The game is definitely growing. MLS is growing, but it's not very good. It's not a very good league. Honestly, it's not a league that I can stomach, and the fact that people come over here to retire and get checks is, amazing to me. I remember when David Beckham came to the MLS, like people thought he was the best thing since sliced bread. I mean, reality is he had an exceptional right foot, but was he ever a world-class player? No. Was he of the highest quality? No, he wasn't. He wasn't. But people in America will look at him like he was on a Messi, Ronaldo, Ronaldinho type level, when the reality is people just liked him because, he was married to a Spice Girl. So that's the sad state of our, football in this country. And the MLS, again, it is getting better. We're getting more imports, but the league as a whole still is a retirement league. It's a league where people come to get their last check when their legs have gone, or nobody wants them at the highest level anymore. And I don't think the MLS will ever be looked at the way those the top leagues in Europe are. I just don't see it. I don't even think the MLS is at the the English Championship, the Tier 2 of English football. I don't think it's at that level, honestly. So again, it's disheartening. But, it is what it is. That's just a harsh reality. I do think American football will end at some point. But maybe that point may not be for another 50 or 60 years. Just like they got rid of, gladiators. Eventually, I think American football will be extinct as more and more research gets done on CTE. I already see less and less kids playing, so that may help. But still, most Americans I know don't even look at the game in an honest way, don't enjoy it because there's not enough scoring and things like that. So until they get, most Americans get involved in, learning about the tactics and looking at skills and things like that, not necessarily worried about the scoreboard. I don't know, because we gear all our games towards, they've cracked down on pitching in baseball. You can't hit anybody in football anymore. You can't hand check in basketball. America's all about scoring as entertainment. I can watch a 0-0 game in the Premier League or the league and be just as entertained as if it was a back and forth 6-5 game. So that's also a fundamental problem that we have here. And the way we look at it, also, because we didn't invent it. The games that we love over here are the games that we invented. It's just the American way of thinking that we do everything better than everyone else. So, and there are a lot of things we do better than everyone else, but obviously world football is not one of them. And I don't think it ever will be, as much as, I'll see people from the national team come on ESPN and talk and do their little spiel. The reality is that those guys are being biased. And most of those guys were marginal, decent, average players. None of those guys could have got a cap for Brazil or Argentina or France or, a quality England team or Spain or Germany or anything like that. You know what I'm saying? As good as Landon Donovan was for America, is he getting in the Brazil team ever? I don't think so. So even the Brazil now, that's not even a great team, from a technical standpoint, he's not on those guys' levels. So, he's levels below a Neymar. So that's just a tough pill to swallow, man. And I don't think it's going to change. I haven't seen it changing. My son is getting older, and I'm hoping to put him in, a team or a program. But again, just playing against kids in the suburbs in America is not really going to get it done. The U.S. Federation has done a lot of stuff to kind of grow the game and try to, create competitive games and competitive leagues across the country for, certain ages. I don't know how much that's going to do again, because the creativity and the imagination comes from playing on the street. It's not something that you could just learn at a camp or at, training. That's something that has to come from you. So I don't know if we'll ever have that here. And yeah, man, that's it. So again, I get asked that question all the time. If you think, let me know in the comments if you think that the U.S. will ever win a World Cup for men's soccer, men's football. I doubt it. And again, I'm open to being wrong. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't see it happening. Every time I see a young guy come through, I'm never overhyped. I get skeptical when people hype people too soon in America when it comes to football. Like people think Pulisic is Captain America and this that. I mean, he barely gets games for Chelsea. He's not one of the first guys on a team sheet, one of the top teams in Europe. So we'll see. I mean, he's still young. He's still developing. I mean, now don't get me wrong. If we had 11 players to the quality of a Pulisic, we'd probably be able to compete. I still don't think we would win a World Cup, but we'd be looking at consistently trying to get to a semifinal or something like that. So, and probably at least get to a England level, because I don't even see them winning a World Cup soon. So, and I think their squad is miles better than ours. I could be wrong with England too, but I doubt it. So, yeah, man, that's just my take on international break. Can't wait to get back to club football when it comes back. Shout out to Liverpool and the Red Sox. I've met John Henry before. Great guy. I know a lot of Liverpool fans aren't very happy with the FSG group because they don't spend a lot of money. But again, they're American businessmen, and they do, if it don't make money, it don't make sense. So we'll see. But it's the Unapologetic Gent. Another episode. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, and I'll keep the content coming. Thanks a lot.